Welcome back to another live episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. I am Dr. Maisha, and today we are talking about behind toxic work relationships and narcissism in the workplace. And I am so excited because guess what? I have with me an old favorite. He is someone who I have had on the show. Now, I say the show. Y'all know that this is the new podcast because the Black Mind Garden sunsetted a couple of months ago. But when we had the Black Mind Garden, Len Sturdivant, psychologist, relationship expert, and hiring strategist, has been on my podcast at least three times. And they have been some of the most listened to episodes. We have some really good conversations. So when I reached out to him, he reached out to me. We were like, "What are we going to talk about?" And one of the things we have not talked about, we've talked about lots of things, relationships, but we have not talked about work relationships and particularly toxic work relationships. And as you all know, I'm all things communication and psychological safety, and he's all things relationship expert, hiring strategist, and he's got some things to say about narcissism. And so let me just share with you who he is. He is the owner of Relationship Coach Pro. He is a psychologist. He is an amazing human being, and he also is a hiring strategist. He has we're going to talk about a little bit of this towards the latter half of the show, but he also has an assessment that you must look at before hiring people in your organization. It will help to avoid some of the turnover that's due to personality clashes.
That's
So I am super excited. I love personality profiles. I'll talk about the Myers-Briggs all day. It's not necessarily that, but I love that kind of talk. So
true.
welcome back. Welcome back to the stage with me, Len. How are you doing?
I am well. It's summer and trying to get down to the beach before the prices go up.
Right.
Here in North Carolina.
Yes, I forgot you live near the beach.
Yeah,
Well,
so it's great.
yes. Well, for those people who are listening who don't who have, this is their first introduction to you. Many people who listened to the Black Mind Garden have followed me over to Behind Beliefs and Behaviors, but we do have some new listeners. So please introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what you do and how you've gotten to where you are.
Okay. Oh, this is a long journey. So Len Sturdivant, I relationship coach pro. I see couples who are stressing out and trying to come back together, and I help them to look at the factors that are impacting the relationship. It kind of hit me one day that dating is kind of like hiring, and you should probably follow the same pathway. You
Mhm.
know, the scrutiny that you use in dating is the scrutiny that you should use in hiring, and the light bulb went off. Hey, so I've been transitioning into doing personality assessments for businesses who need to vet incoming onboarding employees for cultural fitness. And the way we do it is I've got 42 overlays: secretary, administrator, doctor, CEO, CFO, and we pair the assessment up with the position that keeps you DOL and EEOC compliant, Department of Labor and Equal Employment compliant. You have to use an assessment that is job related. You can't just use anything. So that's why people who use the Myers-Briggs got in trouble, and because it's not job related. So we just kind of crafted 42 positions, and we normed them on 20,000 North Americans, and we came up with a prototype for 42 overlays. So
Very cool.
it's
Very cool.
really cool.
Yeah, very cool. Well, one of the impetuses for this conversation was this assessment, and as we have talked about different toxicities in personal relationships, it's useful, I believe. And I love what you said, like the rules that you might use for dating might be similar to ones we could be using for hiring. And so I want to talk about what's sort of behind these toxic work relationships. And then I would really want to move in a little bit into narcissism, because I think that narcissism in the workplace is not talked about at
Oh,
all.
rampant, but it's rampant, and it's kind of the elephant in the room in that, well, 50% of the U.S. population voted for Trump. If you want a marker, there it is. So he has a real this upcoming election. He has a real shot because you got the subsidiaries of narcissism. You got racism. You got fascism. You got um, stubborn people. You got rebellious people, and they all are kind of on that same frequency. And a lot of them come to work, and the drama that they have at home will be replicated at work. So it's incumbent upon the employer to make sure that you're not bringing people in who are going to be disruptive to your culture, who aren't consistent with your culture, people who play well in the sandbox. And
Yeah,
so that's really important.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, you just named in passing a lot of different personality types. You said the stubborn person and the disruptive person, and we have the narcissistic tendencies and the full blown narcissistic personality disorder. You named a lot of different of these types, and so I'd love to focus in, because I believe that we could talk all day if we were to talk about all the different personality types that can create toxicity, because not all of them are. I want to be mindful of the use of binary, but not all of them are super harmful in and of themselves. Some of them are, but then in put in the same settings and having a dynamic created is what creates the toxicity of the workplace,
Correct.
rather than the personality itself being harmful. So I just wanted to kind of like get your thoughts on that aspect of it.
Sure. Well, your brain loves symmetry. It loves homeostasis. One of the measurements that I look at on the assessment is contentment. Now, you got a one or two in contentment, you probably got something going on at home. And so when you come to work, if you don't talk it out, you'll act it out. So scenario, hey Len, we want you to look at our top performer. There's something going on with him. He's not really talking to us. Can you just talk to him? So I do business coaching as well. So I'll talk to him. I'll give him the assessment, and I'll see. It's a psychographic profile. It's 24 personality traits. The one that kind of jumped out at me was contentment. I said, man, what's going on at home? It seems like there's something troubling you at home. And the guy finally admitted, he's like, well, yeah, I'm starting to go through a divorce. Yeah, I know it's impacting my numbers, but I've been married for 22 years. I got children, and everybody's shocked about this. I'm shocked. We're shocked, and it's probably showing up in my numbers at work. And I'll that's what it is. And well, your employee is concerned about you, so they want you to get help. So talk to me about what's going on at home. Okay, and then we kind of get into what he's bottled it up. He hasn't talked to anybody about it, and most people have a hard time accepting help, let alone asking for it. So
Mhm.
when you get those kind of folks in, and once you get them to talk, then they can start to relieve some of this pressure. And I, of course, I talk to people about divorce all the time. Say, well, you think she will come on? I said, yeah, let's talk to it, because what I know from the relationship world is that when two adults go into that parallel escalation, it's not the adults in that's fighting, it's the children on the inside of them that's fighting. And when they
Yeah.
come back down, oh baby, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, blah blah blah. So we kind of talked about that and have his wife to come on, and big misunderstanding, some resentment that was in there from an expectation that wasn't fulfilled, and then it wasn't talked about. So it turned into resentment, and resentment kind of spreads. And so we
Yeah.
were able to save the marriage. And once we got them out of the immediate danger, then his work performance it went up,
Yeah.
right? So he's happy at home now. There isn't going to be a divorce. We're going to work this thing out, and he went back to being the top performer. So it's a the assessment is wonderful in identifying folks who may be going through some things that you can be proactive and say, hey, talk to our business coach Len. He can help you out. So
Yeah, and I think it speaks to what you said earlier, which is the the personality or the behavior that's happening in and of itself may not be something that's, overtly harmful. It may be a product of what's going on at home, right? So there may be behavior that's harmful to, obviously this, with this particular case,
mhm.
it was harmful to his performance. It was harmful to, the numbers of the company, and it wasn't harming a person per se, right?
No,
Within himself. And and it was also due to a circumstance. And we could say what shows up in a person's personality, it could be the same thing, and then when it put inside of a group dynamic,
oh yeah,
causes problems, right? And there are certain personality types and personality things and personalities that come through that are very harmful to people. So there's sort of that polarity. So I mean, let's talk a little bit about narcissism, because I think that is one of those tendencies, one of those, patterns that is very harmful to people in personal and work relationships. And I specifically want to talk about, how does narcissism pretend to show up in the workplace?
wow. You've got so many shades of narcissism. You've got the altruistic narcissist who comes into his job is to save the day and to sit back and get all the glory from it. You've got covert narcissists. Covert narcissists are probably the most dangerous. They they'll smile and look. They can exhibit empathy. It's not that they don't have empathy. The empathy they have is dysfunctional.
Mm.
So they can appear genuine and concerning. And then you've got your overt narcissists. You can see them a mile away, show off, flashy. Can't coach them. Can't tell them what to do. Self-absorbed. Um, these different types of narcissism it's kind of throughout the workplace, and it's amazing how they show up, because it's not something that's obvious, but it's very subtle. I did a dissertation on narcissism. Does
Yeah.
does narcissism influence divorce? And
Yeah.
everybody's well, like, yeah, well, duh. But I had to look at 3,000 narcissists to come up with the actual numbers. So
Wow. Wow.
it's very true that it does impact it. So uh, the workplace is very similar to home. So if I'm narcissistic at home, when I come to work, I'm looking for symmetry. I'm looking for balance. I'm looking to have some of the same things so my brain can know what to expect.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, let's talk about a little bit more about some of the less overt ones. I would love to hear a little bit more about the altruistic narcissist, and how they tend to show up, and like what are flags that people, because a lot of times, when we think about people who are impacted, and this we talk about this term gaslighting, right?
Mhm.
And um, we know that many people gaslight other people. We also know that self gaslighting can occur as well. So I would love to hear, like, how does the altruistic person show up in the workplace? What are some of, like, the signs that an altruistic person may be gaslighting someone, maybe love bombing someone? Like, and where does that cycle of abuse kind of start to come in
Right.
with an altruist versus maybe a covert person?
Right. Covert's not going to be show off at all.
Right.
Covert is exactly what it seems to be. Covert, they'll kind of, you know, stab you in the back and then come around to the front of you and go, what happened? You know, well, let's look for the person who did that. Oh my God. And show all this concern, almost like Munchausen, you know, where, you know, the person, they irritate the kid in some way, that everybody comes over for help. So the covert narcissist won't draw that kind of attention. The altruistic narcissist gets his or her narcissistic supply from the praises of coming in and saving the day. You turn the data center back on, or you fix the problem that we were, and it's all about getting that narcissistic supply. Once you get that, once you find that narcissistic supply, you just keep doing more of the behavior to receive the supply.
And what happens if that supply is disrupted?
Well, then
you take away that supply, or someone else is getting the accolades.
Oh, well, now it's a competition. So, you know, you're trying to steal my supply, or you're trying to steal my spotlight. Well, that's a problem, because I'm the big dog around here. I get the praise and adoration. I don't know who you are. So it's all kind of sabotage plots, and I'm going to get my power back, and I'm going to restore my narcissistic supply. So I'm going to continue to do those things that give me glory, that in the eyes of the people around me, I'm the hero. I'm the one who comes in and saves the day.
So then from an altruistic narcissist perspective, if they're not the hero, it's a whole problem, and they're going to do whatever it takes to get back in the position of the hero.
Right, to restore that energy.
Including sabotaging another person. And then being like, oh, what happened? You know, like, sabotage.
Right. Set fire and then come in and put it out.
Or maybe sabotaging them and then coming and saving the day.
Right. Yeah. It's so many subplots to that. And here's where having a thorough personality assessment it's a psychographic profile that looks at 24 traits. Is red zone, yellow zone, green zone, and you look at these traits and you go, okay, this person's in the red zone in several of these traits. We think that may be problematic, and we want you to go see Len. So, but many employers don't. It's kind of hard to we had one guy, CEO guy, and he's like, well, we want to take it. And I'm like, you sure you want to look at some people downstream first? Because this is a very hold a mirror up to you. You may not like what you see kind of test. And say, no, I know what you're trying to do. No, we need to know what's in the room. And wow. I've seen some CEOs that probably shouldn't be CEOs.
Yeah, I imagine that. So I get like this whole altruism piece and they're being the hero and saving the day. What is the source for the covert person? Like, what's the source for them? Like, what, the altruism person gets their energy from being the hero and being in the limelight in that way. But the covert person, where's that power for them?
The power with the covert narcissism is I know what's going on and you don't.
Oh.
I know the explanation and because I'm keeping that, I don't want any exposure for that. I know what happened to the budget, because I went in and I did some things to the budget, and now this thing is blown up and everybody's looking around who did it. Covert narcissists usually have a target, and they have a mission and a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And covert narcissists usually target people that are contrary to their existence.
Contrary. So say more about that. Contrary to their existence.
Right. So if you're a threat, if you're smarter, if you're nicer, you get more accolades, you get more attention. The covert narcissist who would love to have that attention kind of sees you getting all this attention, and they start hating you for it. Like, why are you getting all that attention? And why am I not getting all those accolades?
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll set out to kind of sabotage all the stuff that's happening to you, but you won't see them do it. It's very unobtrusive. You won't know who, put some ipecac syrup in your yogurt.
Got it. So yeah, so it's really, the theme is the same. They want power, they want attention,
Right.
and the way they show up is different.
The way they show up.
The overt narcissist shows up flashy, shows up, you can't, they're flashy and arrogant, you can't tell them anything. That's the overt one. They show up like that.
Mm-hmm.
The covert one may only show up as sort of, may show up as quote unquote, I'm going to say quote unquote normal.
Like, yeah, and see,
unassuming,
yes,
unassuming,
yes. You would never suspect it. When they finally get caught, people go, "I never saw it coming." They are so nice. Oh my goodness, yeah. Versus the overt or malignant narcissist, technical term, like Donald Trump. You can see him coming a mile away. Donald Trump's comorbid with, usually if you're narcissistic, you're usually comorbid with something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so then you have the altruistic who shows up as the hero in the story always. So that's there. So they just show up differently in the story. Now here's the question I have, because I think this is what probably a lot of people are asking who are listening. As a person who might be impacted by a narcissist, what is it? How do I know? Like, what does it feel like on the other side of that? Because I think that's, whether they show up as the hero, whether they show up as the covert. I mean, clearly we don't even have to talk much about the malignant, because that is what it is. But I think some of these lesser known ones, how can a person in the workplace who feels like something it feels toxic, how can they know, okay, this person I'm being impacted in some way by some narcissistic tendencies or personalities? What are some warning signs for them so that they can take care of themselves? Because I think that's very important.
It's huge. Bullying is the new thing that's hitting the workplace now. So if you're a victim of being bullied, that is certainly one up with bullies or narcs. So and it shows up in that you feel like it's uncomfortable for you to come to work. It's uncomfortable for you to sit in the cubicle next to this person. If you're especially if you're an empath, I'm an empath. Highly sensitive people, introverts, empath, nurturers. These are the people who are narcissistic suppliers, and they're going to attract people who need to be helped, healed, fixed, saved, or rescued. Those are the characteristics. And so if I'm a caring, empathic person, if any narcissists are in my space, they'll be attracted to me.
Right.
And I've been there, hated it.
Yeah. And so, you talked about being uncomfortable or bullying, rather. You talked about being bullied, and it's probably useful for people to get bullying occurs in multiple domains, right? Like I think when people think of bullying, they think of, this overt verbal assault, but it's not always just the overt assault so much as it could be like, withholding, could be withholding of information or withholding of communication, or passive aggressiveness, consistently passive aggressiveness, or could be um the like I have one client who was sharing that in her workplace meeting there was a person who spoke to everyone in the room except for her. And it was just very loud, right? And so like that's sort of like a form of bullying, withholding, we'll say affections for lack of a better word, because in the workplace we know that could be taken a certain way, but
Sure.
like withholding that connection, that's the withholding connection. So these are, so like there's the withhold in addition to the actual act of assaulting, or the aggressions, the subtle,
Aggressive.
the
Yeah.
acts of exclusion,
Yes.
overt acts of exclusion, or subtle acts of exclusion.
Yes.
These are these types of things, whether it be um, in verbal communication, in nonverbal communication, or in digital communication, because I
Sure.
think that can be show up as well. So yeah, that bullying, and that's really interesting. And I mean, gaslighting is also, I bring
Yeah.
that up again, as a form of bullying.
So when people exit, especially highly sensitive people are usually the first to exit. And in the exit interview, what I'm hearing a lot of is the money's fine. It's the people who are in management who are driving folks off. So one of the things we do in our corporate enterprise packages, we look at the rank and file, we look at your managers, and we can identify those managers who may have that issue. And if you're running folks away, or if people are exiting because of management, then it's time we take a look at management and who's doing it, and what are their motivations. And you know it gets kind of political. So doing an assessment one time, and I did all these assessments, and it's like this one stood out. I'm like, well, who is this person? I'm blind. I don't know name, number, race, gender. I don't know any of it. So I'm looking at a profile. I'm like, well, wow, who's this? Well, that's the president's son. Oh, okay. Who has free reign to do whatever he wants, terrorize people, doesn't really like the job, needs the money, father's there, who doesn't really rein him in, and the people around him complain about him, but no one does anything about it.
Yeah. And so in terms of like the person who's on the lived experience side of someone who is the narcissist in any of those domains, is there anything else that, you talk about them being like, if you're an empath, a highly sensitive person, which by the way I am as well, the discomfort or of being near the person, or is there anything else like that shows up in the person who's being sort of who is the object of the narcissist's desire or power, or being drained, or like what else comes up for them as well?
Right. So highly sensitive people in the workplace, they're going to attract. It's almost a target-rich environment for narcissists to be around people who actually care, want to get the job done, nurturing, highly intelligent, people who are motivated to play well with others in the sandbox. And so narcissists are going to naturally be attracted to them. So if you find yourself in that situation, the first defense is no. You have to, how you take care of yourself is your ability to say no, which establishes your ability to establish a boundary. Boundaries let people know how you want to be treated. So in establishing those two things, it's really important. And depending on how HR is structured, you should be able to go to HR and say, hey, this person is harassing me, tell them leave me alone. And here's where it gets really, we've been in some political situations that I can identify them all day. I can tell you, make a suggestion what to do, but it's the bottom line is going to be up to the employer to execute, or do we put you on a performance improvement plan? Do we put you in some type of counseling or coaching to kind of mitigate that? But for the person who is on the receiving end of it, you have to take your power back, because narcissists only understand 5 languages. And here are the 5 languages. Wrote them down: shame, exposure, leverage, force, and consequence. If it's not one of these 5 languages, in one ear and out the other.
That's powerful. Can you say those 5 things again?
Sure. Shame. To expose. Shame is all about exposure. I don't want you to see that about me.
Right.
So shame, exposure, leverage. Do you have enough leverage? Donald Trump's in court. That's leverage. That leverage has a specific consequence to it. And if you've got a good enough vehicle, it'll have force. Force is the actual taking him and locking him up and doing that. So shame, exposure, leverage, force, and consequence. Those are the languages that most narcissists understand. If you're not speaking that language, you're wasting time.
And these are the ways that people who are on the receiving end can take care of themselves, is by speaking those languages, setting those boundaries, and setting and here's the piece, y'all. You can set the boundary, but if you don't hold your own boundary, then you're actually giving more fuel.
Right. And here's where it gets really tricky, because I've spoken to a lot of victims, and turns out they're also bullied in their families. Okay? So here's the symmetry. I come to work and wow, I'm recreating the same things that happen at home. So that those boundaries, I don't have boundaries. I don't have my anger available to me. So if I didn't have my anger available to me at home, it's going to be real hard for me to have my anger available to me at work.
Correct.
And here's where it gets kind of tricky, because you have got to tap into that anger to say, hey, speak one of these 5 languages, take up for yourself, and it's foreign, because it's like, I don't know how to take my power back. I don't know how to have my anger available to me, because I've never had my anger available to me.
Yeah. And I think it's important to be able to like experience and have available to you all of the emotions and understand them as informations, because it's those things that will help you to know it's time to set a boundary. It's that thing that will let you know it's time to set that boundary, and that will allow you to know in your body, oh, this is coming up. That means that boundary's coming. They're coming close to it. I need to hold that boundary, right? And so I think that's just so useful. The other piece that it brings up for me is you talked about the possibility of them going to HR. And I think this is the place, and at the end of the day, it's the employer. This is the place where, the employers, this is where places where the employer can create psychological safety in the workplace, because when they make it safe to report and they actually are congruent in their actions and taking actions inside of the reporting, right? So you can make it safe to report, but if there's no accountability, if there's no, and I talk a lot about this when I do my psychological safety trainings, if there's no like actual accountability, then you're not creating trust within the organization. You're actually threatening and destroying trust in the organization. So that psychological safety has to come with that accountability, that trust. And so the employers have to be congruent in and of themselves and have the integrity and the courage and the all of the things to be able to enforce their own boundaries around the policies as well. So I think that is extremely important in how, there's the personal responsibility or the personal actions that can be taken by the person experiencing the harm. And if the organization is safe enough to report, then the organization then has a responsibility to take action to protect the person who was harmed. And that's what creates an organization where people want to stay. And then
Yes.
in terms of like what you're doing in terms of your assessments, if another way that I think that organizations can create safety is by using these types of assessments, so you don't get these people in the first place,
On
right? So
board.
that's
Yes.
sort of like on the preventive side, but we all know that not everybody has taken your assessment, and so there's a spectrum, and it's important to understand along the spectrum what people can do, what at all levels, what people who are being harmed by the narcissist can do, what HR can do, what the organization can do, and how they can prevent future harm by utilizing things like this assessment. So I appreciate all of it, the all levels of it, the polarities and the spectrum of work to be done to be able to really start to dismantle toxicity in the workplace.
It's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
The fish stinks from the head down. So the first place, the corporate environments that are implementing these changes start with the C-suite.
Absolutely, absolutely. I always say that the C suite sets the culture. They are the ones. I work with an organization here in Atlanta, and we were doing our anti racism work. Started with the CEO and the CHRO, and then to the senior leadership team, and
Wow.
that transform that group, and it's trickling down, and they're having their directors and managers do our work with us, but they're coming into it excited because the C-suite set the culture and got them excited about the possible changes that and how it can benefit the whole organization. So I think that is incredibly true. Like the C-suite, starting with the CEO, because sometimes you'll have the senior leadership doing stuff, but the CEO is like, oh, I'm exempt. So the CEOs have to be involved in addition to the entire executive team. Now, one thing I will say, just having known several CEOs, is that sometimes, and this is just a place that I'm exploring as well in my work, is that sometimes in this work of psychological safety and trauma, sometimes the CEOs need their own container because there are things that they don't feel comfortable saying with their senior leadership team. And so, one of the places of exploration is how do we create the container, the safe space for them, because they're at the top, and we all know it's lonely at the top. They're answer to the board members, of course, but still inside of the organization. So it's just a food for thought, something I've been thinking of. But coming back to you, I just, we could talk all day. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, whoa, okay. I really appreciate the work that you're doing with this assessment, because it really is a preventive measure. It is a place where organizations, it is an actionable step where
Yes.
organizations can begin to create safety by, preventing toxic personalities, I should say, coming into their workplace, and where they can examine dynamics between personalities, because while not all personalities are toxic personalities, dynamics can become toxic among personalities. And when you know this, then you can actually manage that aspect of it. So
Right.
there's just all kinds of things that these kinds of assessments can do to make a workplace safer for the organization, and to know then what's next to do, what kinds of trainings, what types of coachings, what types of
Coaching.
educations or courses or
Yeah.
programs can be done.
Yeah.
And so thanks for bringing this element into the conversation. And I would really love it if you would share with the audience very quickly, how can they reach you if they are like, ooh, let me explore this assessment? How can they
Sure.
reach you and talk to you about it?
Sure. HiringSolutions.pro is the website, and the assessment is $450, and we give you a 45-page debrief, and you actually sit down and talk with me. Now, one of the things I emphasize, and this is really important for me, is I emphasize redemption. Okay, you can come in that way, but I believe in people being able to say, hey, this is going on. Hey, let me talk to you. Let's try these behaviors. I know that in order to create, the brain hates change. So in order to create a change, we have to do a behavior 28 times in a row through inculcation. So say, hey, here's some behaviors that I want you to try out and go back into the workplace and begin this process of redemption. Because the inside, I'm also looking at, what's driving this person. Are they in the adult state or are they in the child state, right? We try to get them out of that child state and into that prefrontal cortex where I can make adult decisions and not let my child part get in there. Because once my child part, and it's the most fluid switch ever, once I'm in my child energy, scorch earth.
Yeah, absolutely. So hiring solutions
.pro.
Hiring solutions.pro. Y'all, we will have this in the show notes, so that you can, reach out to Len and ask him and bring him on to give these assessments to your folks, your people, your staff, your leaders, your executives. So please go to hiringsolutions.pro and check out my friend Len, and share this episode with a colleague, with a coworker, with a leader in your organization, with a friend, with a family member who maybe work in an organization, because I think this is so important. So many people are dealing with mental health issues in the workplace, and some of it has to do with the dynamics of toxicity that exist on all levels. And when we can have leaders making organizations safer for people to work, for their staff and their leaders to work in, then that will begin to help. It won't by any means mitigate it altogether, but if you're a place where you go to for 8 to 10 hours to work needs to be a safe and healthy environment. So with that, I leave you. And of course, you all know what I do. I'm all about, helping people build the skills of the nuances of trauma-informed communication for psychological safety. You all know that my Communication That Transforms course is now accredited for 22 continuing medical education credits. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I'll have that link also in the show notes. And you can discover more about how to bring me in to speak or do workshops on communication and psychological safety by going to my website, mindremappingacademy.com. So with that, thank you again, Len, for being with me again. This is not the last time. I always bring you back. This conversation, as we can see, we have 45 minutes in. It is a multiple episode conversation. We definitely will come back and talk a little bit more about the other kinds of personalities that you mentioned and how they can create toxic dynamics. So thank you again. And audience, thank you for listening. Without you, there is no podcast. You all are the bridge to a new kind of conversation. And with that, I appreciate you. So until we see you next time, my good people, stay empowered.